So we have assembled. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Want to apologize for getting started late. We had a hearing downstairs that we were close enough to finish that we wanted to just finish it instead of going back after this. So first order of business is to approve the agenda minutes from March 4th. You all have seen those. Are there any additions or corrections?
No.
Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from March 4th say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved 5-0. Tariffs and New Orders. We have 4 of them. First up is file number EF 2020-0224. This is in the matter of the application of Union Electric Company, DBA Ameren, Missouri, for an order authorizing the issue and sale of up to $465 million aggregate principal amount of additional long-term indebtedness. Ameren, Missouri requested authority to issue and sell additional long-term indebtedness. The company states that it plans to use the funds to pay for the matured amount on a secured note and to refinance other short-term debt. Staff has reviewed the application and recommends that the application be approved subject to certain conditions. Those conditions include a 1-year expiration on the authority, that the company provide reports on any issued secured debt, and that the Commission reserve the right to reconsider rate-making treatment for the financing transactions. Ameren stated that it will accept the conditions as staff has suggested. I've reviewed the application and staff's recommendation and think that the request is not detrimental to the public interest, and therefore I support the order as drafted, version 2. Mr. Kenny.
I support the order.
I'm in support.
I'm in support.
I'm glad to see the sunset provision in there, but I'm also in support.
All right. All those in favor of approving version 2 say aye.
Aye.
Order's approved 5-0. Next up, file number EO 2019-0376. This is in the matter of the second prudence review of the Missouri Energy Efficiency Investment Act Cycle 2 Energy Efficiency Programs for Union Electric Company, DBA Ameren, Missouri. Last summer, staff began its prudence review for Cycle 2 of Ameren's MIA program. After staff recommended certain disallowances, Ameren requested a hearing. Since then, the company, staff, and OPC have worked on a compromise and reached a settlement that they state will resolve all outstanding issues. Under the terms of their agreement, a $50,000 credit will go to customers as an ordered adjustment in the company's energy efficiency rate calculation. I think that the unopposed agreement is reasonable. The compromise by the parties is worthy of our support, and I recommend that we approve the stipulation and agreement version 1.
I support the order.
I'm in support.
I'm in support.
I'm in support.
All right, all those in favor of approving version 1 say aye.
Aye.
It's approved 5-0. Next up, file number EO 2020-0220 and ER 2020-0221. This is in the matter of the application of Evergy, Missouri Metro's application for fuel and purchase power cost recovery rate adjustment and fuel adjustment clause true-up. Evergy Metro filed their FAC true-up recovery period 6 that ran from October 2018 through September 2019. Staff reviewed the application and supporting documents and agrees with the company's calculations that it had overcollected approximately $398,042 for that period. Evergy Metro also submitted tariff sheets to adjust its FAC tariff effective April 2020. This interim rate adjustment includes the true-up amounts for the recovery period 6. Staff reviewed the substitute tariff sheets and recommended that they be approved subject to true-up and prudence reviews. This order approves the true-up amount and approves the FAC tariff sheet, and I recommend we support the order as drafted, version 1.
As do I.
I'm in support.
As do I.
I support the order.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted, version 1 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Order's approved 5-0. And finally, file number EO 2019-0132. This is in the matter of Evergy, Missouri Metro and Evergy, Missouri West's notice of intent to file applications for authority to establish a demand-side programs investment mechanism. The Commission previously issued a report and order on Evergy, Missouri Metro's MIA application. This is an order amending that report to clear up some of the findings and decisions that the Commission had made, and I support the amended report and order as drafted, version 5.
We've dealt with this quite a bit. I support it. I'm happy to see we move in this direction. Support the order.
I'm in support.
I'm in support.
Support the order.
All right, all those in favor of approving version 5 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved approved 5-0. That concludes reports and orders. Next up, we have case discussion. And we have one case up for discussion today. This is file number ER 2019-0335. Ameren, Missouri's rate and case non-unanimous stipulation and agreement. Judge DePel.
So, as you all are aware, we have stipulation and agreement settling a majority of the issues, and then also a second stipulation and agreement which would settle the one issue that we were going to hear today that then we didn't, the affiliate transactions issue. So I'm really here because of the timing. The stipulation and agreement considers that these rates would go into effect on April 1st. And in order to do that, the commission would need to approve the stipulation and agreement and have the time for tariffs to be filed and so forth. So I'm here today to find out whether or not you want to approve the agreement and have an order doing that on next week's agenda, or if the commission wants to take some other action.
So after the on the record, there were some issues raised by commissioners that we asked for clarification on. I believe you issued an order seeking input from the parties, and we've received responses.
And I summarized those responses for you here in this memo.
My position, I appreciate the parties submitting responses to our last order, asking that those three issues the commissioners have brought up questions on. I'm glad to see that Ameren agreed to provide the commission with updates on the monthly meetings and how to educate customers on the time of use rates. I think that moving customers to time of use rates, it's extremely important that the education be thorough and strong so that they understand what it is that their rate is made up on, so that they can modify their behavior if they can, or they can choose an appropriate rate structure if they're not in a position to change the amount of power they use and when they need it. I also think it's important that we get updates from them on the IT front, since that's also a crucial part of their AMI meter rollout. I know that there may be some that would like to have more sooner, but I think that the default time of use rate, once it starts rolling out next January, I kind of look at it as a 6-month pilot program, because the company's already said that they're coming back in July with another rate case where we will be addressing these rates again. And I also agree with Ameren staff and OPC that there are some advantages to treating the opt-out default program as a way to ease customers into it, as instead of maybe being more aggressive right up front. I think I'll be supporting the unopposed agreement because I think that it's a good compromise. And I also don't want to see any delay in customers receiving the benefit of a $32 million rate reduction that they would like to go in April 1st. I think that we should approve it and get it out to them as quickly as possible. I think that in their answers, particularly as it related to Commissioner Holzman's issue, that they think that the next rate case that they file, they'll be able to address those more thoroughly, with this being basically a 6-month interim rate between this case and the next one. I think that that's appropriate, and I'm hopeful that we can get those taken care of in the next one. So I don't see any reason to delay the rate cut to customers. So, Commissioner Kinney?
I think I agree with everything you said, but I'll reiterate it. And I support the corrected non-unanimous stipulation and agreement, and regarding the time of use changes or proposals, I agree with staff, OPC, and the company that we're going in the right direction, and I think we should leave it at that. So, but I do support the non-unanimous stipulation and agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, I support a lot of the stuff that's in there, but I do not support the default rate for the time of use. When we had asked for them to reevaluate and take a look at this, the concern was that the default rate is so similar to the flat rate that it doesn't even resemble anything of a time of use rate. The difference is only a 0.5%. And the concern is that the path of least resistance to default back to the flat rate is so close to what they're at, then they don't have to worry about it. So the concern was that the default rate, not that it wasn't aggressive enough, because you have several other options for people that are more aggressive. The concern was the default rate is so similar to the flat rate that it doesn't even differentiate itself as a time of use rate. So what we were attempting to get people to address was that difference. Now the response we got from staff was, if you use the Smart Saver rate, you'd have 10% of Ameren's customers see increases of 25%. That's not at all what we were saying. We wouldn't say we wanted to have the default rate be, something like the Smart Saver rate. But going from a 0.5 cent, which maybe would be about a 1% increase on rates, to a 25%, there's a lot of room in between there. So what the goal I was trying to get the parties to at least discuss was, instead of a 0.5 cent differential, what about doubling it to a cent? Or tripling it to a 1.5 cent? And so you might see a 2% increase, or a 2.5, or something, to give a little bit more differential between the flat rate and the default rate, not go all the way to the Smart Saver rate or something. So I viewed staff's response kind of as like just the scare tactic of, we have to ease people in or there'll be this massive rate shock. Let's also stop and say, okay, so if we were to do the 0.5% is that, so maybe a 1% change in people's rates. Well, the decrease in rates is going to be 1.15% to the average residential customer. So they're not even going to see anything, because they're actually might still see a small decrease. So there's not going to be this fear of, oh my gosh, people are going to hate TOU rates because I'm going to see an increase, because they're already going to see a 1.15% decrease in their rates. Secondly, this is going to take Ameren 5 years to roll out the meters. So we're going to be, over a 5-year period, gradually introducing time of use rates to the state. And this fear of a 1% or a 1.5% or a 2% is going to be too much for consumers to handle over a 5-year period, to me is just is ludicrous. You take a look at Missouri's customers' ability to absorb rates. We never ever want to raise rates on customers, but if you look back at some of Ameren's past cases, and in 2014 there was a 4.46% increase in the rates. I didn't see massive people and people protesting in the streets and stuff, especially when the customers didn't even have an option to do anything else. The only way they could control costs is to stop using energy. But when you're providing a time of use rate, and so they might see a small increase, they still have options to change their behavior to save more money, or they can go back to the default rate. So they would actually have options, unlike in past. Empire had a case in 2014 with a 3.88% increase. So this default fear that consumers can't handle a slight increase in stuff while still giving them multiple options to adjust their behavior, I think is unfounded, especially when we're going to see a rate decrease. So if you're going to try to roll out a program, now is the optimum time to introduce something new when you're decreasing rates, because you're going to mitigate any cost increase that is there. So having a default rate that is so barely incremental from the flat rate that people are using on, it's going to get completely lost. And if people do look at their bill and they say, so why should I even mess with this? I can just go back to the default rate for, it's only a 0.5 cent, I don't even have to think about it. Now granted, there will be people that say, I want to manage my energy and I want to do that, but not everybody's going to have a smart meter yet, not everybody's going to have a smart thermometer yet. But it's that concern that the flat rate is so similar that people would just default back to the flat rate. So that was kind of where I was trying to get people to move. Is not, hey, let's get everybody with massive rate shock and things. Let's just differentiate a little bit different. We just had a hearing downstairs where we learned or maybe some people knew, that the fuel adjustment clause started in a negotiation amongst commissioners, and that is how we got to the 95.5 option. Now it's the status quo. And now you have to it's defending the status quo, and it's very, very difficult. We are now, in this order, creating the status quo. Now, I am encouraged by the chairman's comments that he views this as a 6-month pilot, because I would definitely say if this passed, I want to come back, in 6 months and say we need to take a look at that. But here's the concern. The concern is, that we even heard testimony downstairs, is after the fuel adjustment clause was changed, there was interest by the commission to kind of revisit it and stuff. But the argument came back was, well, we don't have enough data yet. We don't have enough data. We got to let this thing play out. And then I can see that as a concern. They'll say, well, we just started rolling it out. We don't know how it's impacting only a few people. And so nothing is going to happen in the next rate case. And then you're going to be stuck with the status quo as right here. And in this commission, we always joke about kicking the can down the road. The can had to start somewhere. We are setting the can in the road, and this is our initial kick. Once we start this, it's going to be very difficult for us to change. So I strongly would urge that we deny the first stipulation, tell the parties to go back and look at the default rate compared to the flat rate, not the saver rate, not the EV charging rate and the stuff, but say, is there room to increase the difference by a cent, a half a cent, and maybe take it from 12 hours down to 10 or 9, to give it something that is differential from the flat rate. Because if we don't, I believe we are setting the status quo, and then it'll be very difficult to change in the future. And for those reasons, even though I love the decrease and I love everything else, I think we're really either passing bad legislation because it's what we can get done and we know it kind of isn't the best, and then we have to deal with it later on, and then trying to change it is so hard. Same thing with here. We're creating the status quo. So that's my 2 cents.
So, Commissioner Roop, I think it behooves staff and OPC and Ameren to pay attention to your comments, because when you're lucid, they make very much good sense. And I think that your points are well taken, and you almost always can come up with a position that makes sense. I like the idea of looking at this almost like a pilot program. We're going to be coming back in 6 months. Look at this as an interim rate, and I believe it's a good compromise. I was very interested last week during the On the Record with the conversation about the default rates. I think your concerns make a lot of sense, and those are things that I looked at and considered. But I think this is we're in a good spot right now. I want to move forward with this and be evaluating it and see what happens in 6 months. So I'm in agreement with the previous comments by the chairman and Commissioner Kenny.
I am really torn on this one. On one hand, I completely agree with Commissioner Roop in most of everything he said. Everything from the evaluation of the default rate not being enough of a margin to be demonstrable to the ratepayer to even know that they're in it. A lot of us go about our daily lives and we don't even look at our utility bill, and it may have gone up, and then we attribute that to the, kids use the microwave too much that month, and we don't even know why or things happen. So I think we don't want to have shock rates, but we want to have enough of a marginal difference to where they ask why. Why is this different, and what can I do about it? And time of use rates, I'm very supportive of them. I'm very supportive of them because they provide flexibility to the ratepayer to put them at the center of decision making and allowing them to take steps to control their power usage, and that has a benefit financially if they do it correctly, and also environmentally. Because if you're using your heavy loads at night when the wind's blowing and you're not, having demand increase during peak times, then that's going to save the entire rate base money in the long run. So the time of use is a great step in the right direction. But if no one knows that they're in a time of use, then what good is it? And from that standpoint, I agree with Commissioner Roop. That kind of segues me to the issue I had, which was surrounding the net meter customers, the customer generators. And right now, as it stands, they're not going to have access to these time of use. And that's a problem. It's a problem for two reasons. One, the statute for the Net Metering and Easy Connection Act, which I was the sponsor of when I was in the House, so I'm fairly familiar with it. Section 386.890, subsection 3, section 2, says offer the customer generator a tariff or contract that is identical in electrical energy rates, rate structure, and monthly charges to the contract or tariff that a customer would be assigned if the customer were not eligible customer generator, but shall not be charged the customer generator any additional standby capacity, interconnection, or other fee or charge that would not otherwise be charged if the customer were not an eligible customer generator. Basically saying that just because you spent your own money investing on solar panels because you're environmentally conscious or because you want to peak load shave to help the rest of the rate base out, you shouldn't be penalized. And that's what the statute says. And right now, these ratepayers are penalized because they're not going to be offered the saver rate or the other rate. We do have in the EV charging, there's a $1.25 additional charge that you have to pay in order to have access to the rate. So because
if you don't have an AMI meter,
and that's to all of the ratepayers. So I'm okay with a customer generator being charged a standby charge as long as it's the same thing to all the other ratepayers. So if a compromise were to come forward to say, if you're a net metered customer and you have to pay a little extra to get into one of these time of use factors, that's an okay discussion to have as long as it's commensurate with everyone else's rate that they have to pay into to get into that. I would vote no on this, but for the fact we're going to be back in 6 months. I would vote no on this, but for the fact that it's a rate cut and delaying that rate cut to the ratepayers when we have a potential solution in front of us in a timely fashion doesn't make sense. So on one hand, I'm with Commissioner Roop, but on the other hand, I'm with Commissioner Coleman because I think that we're going to be back here in July. So my message to everyone is that if this were a longer runway than 6 months, I would be voting no on this position. So I'm going to support the order today with the utmost urgent, recommendation that net metered customers are treated the same way. If it comes down to the EV level is where they best fit, because a lot of customer generators who buy solar panels are also the ones driving the EV vehicles, and you want to give them a chance to charge at night at a lower rate, and that's the agreement we come up with, and this ultimate saver and the super saver might be a stretch too far with what the demand side charge might be, then let's have that conversation and bring us something that looks like that, and I think that we can get there. But not doing anything for them is not something I would support.
I have a question for the judge.
yeah, Commissioner.
Judge, so I have a question. So let's assume that this commission turned down this.
But we didn't. Let's not even assume that.
Yeah.
Currently
Is
affordable,
there
but
still?
let's
Yeah,
assume.
I'm just
Heart attack.
is there still time to get something else done before the tariffs have to go into effect?
There's still time.
But Judge, can I answer that?
It would be very difficult.
How many days did we have set for a hearing?
We originally had 2 weeks,
2 weeks.
set.
10 days?
10
Yeah,
days?
10
We did
days.
it in 3 hours. And I noticed there were some very good things in this agreement. Billing requirements, revenue requirements, the amortizations, fuel adjustment on the tariffs. It had rate base adjustments, return on equity, all rate design, allocation, ResRam. They just went through it and through all kinds of things that we didn't have a hearing on. And then I go to page 54, the general provisions, section 54. If the commission does not approve the stipulation unconditionally, without modification, it's void. So that means we go back and have a hearing on everything. And one of the things I've learned, or I've been told, and it's just in my time here, is that many people, they don't want time of use. They don't want net metering, but they sure wanted that 9.4 to 9.8 ROE. So they give on this and give on that, and then we start if we interfere with their stip, which I understand your sentiments exactly, I understand, and yours too. The problem is we throw it all back in their lap, and they're not going to go back and just say, "Oh, let's help Roop and we'll all agree." Well, let's throw net meter and we'll all agree. They just don't. That's just.
I think it's a bluff. I think it's a bluff. I think if we say no to this stipulation and we say this is the problem, everything else is good, and all you got to do is just make some modifications to this. I don't think there's a constituency out there that's like, oh, we're throwing everything up.
One of the things that we have to be though is pragmatic, and both staff and the utilities have basically said they're not prepared from an IT standpoint to implement what I'm wanting to do, which is treat all customers equally. And if that's the case, then 6 months, it's going to take them that time to get prepared to do it. And all I would be doing is voting to delay that rate cut from going into effect. So I'm essentially saying you have 6 months to fix this, or there's going to be different decisions.
So I think
He's new. Remember that one hearing about 8 months ago, and you and Hall stormed out because they came to the hearing after a year and didn't even put the stuff in you guys told them to do? Yeah. They don't.
Well, all you need is 3. At that 3 to storm out, and then you're in a different position.
So I will say, it looks
I
like
followed him.
looks like the commission is speaking, but I am extremely encouraged by the comments that people are looking at this as a pilot program, and pilot programs can be changed, and pilot programs should be evaluated and should be looked. And I hope that is the case, and I hope that we don't get the default argument of, well, we don't have enough data, so we can't change it midstream and stuff. So I will resign myself that I'm going to lose again, which I'm totally cool with. But the fact that there is a glimmer of hope that if we do look at this as a pilot project and we're not stamping our stamp of approval of the status quo, and when we come back here 10 years later, this is the default rate and it just sucks and it's just impossible to change it because, well, it's the 95.5 cut. That's the way we've done it. And then why should we change it? You have to prove why we should change it.
I'm okay with changing to 95.5 if it makes sense, though.
If it made sense.
Yeah.
You know?
so. I think that it would behoove all of the parties listening to this conversation to keep this in mind when they come back for the next rate case, because I think it's clear that there are concerns. To go back to your analogy, though, of setting the status quo and kicking the can down the road, my thought is by approving this, we are setting, to some extent, we are setting the new status quo in that right now there are no time of use rates, and under this there will be several, including getting the rate cut in. So when we come back to review the one, we don't have to start from scratch and create 4 or 5 others because they're already there. And I think that giving customers those choices as soon as possible, while we may not like the one, I think that it makes sense to go ahead and move forward and give them the others, and then when we come back, they already have the others, and we can just focus on the one. Is how I'm looking at it.
Including his $1.20 savings per customer.
So,
That's right.
I would also
All right,
the other utilities who potentially are thinking about this to factor this discussion into
they're
their
watching.
They're listening.
yeah,
There's no
their
question. There's no question.
preliminary.
Thank you, Judge. I think you have your direction on that. So due to the operation of law date, we expect to see an order on this next week.
Yes, and I'm assuming that approval went for the second agreement
step
as well.
also, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll approve the second step.
That one might
Thank
be
you.
unanimous. All right, thank you. We do have another discussion today. Semi-annual electric and natural gas safety events report. Kathleen McNellis.
So, twice a year, Mr. Poston and I provide statistics on incidents for natural gas and electric. And you should have a copy of those. If you don't, we have a couple. Basically, these summarize statistics from the reports that the utilities are required to provide to the commission. So if you guys have any questions, we're here to answer them.
I've reviewed them. I don't have any
No, I
questions.
don't have a
Nor do I.
question.
Is there a vote required on approval of them, or?
No,
Okay.
it's for information.
Well, I have no questions, or any other questions, Commissioner?
Well, I reviewing this report, any fatality is an awful situation, but I do see that last year we were down to one fatality from an all-time high just 5 years ago of 6 fatalities. So I wonder if, since you're pulling these reports together, are you noticing that in part what's helping the situation is the communication from the utility companies getting the word out to customers? What do you think is helping with this reduction? Because back in 2007 there were 5 deaths, in 2011 there were 5.
I'll take that. The electric side. It really is highly variable year to year, the causes of the accidents and fatalities that we see. And
I see in this case the person had thought that they had disconnected the one electrical charging area, but not at the meter. Is that what it was?
And for a point of comparison, last year, or in calendar year 2018, we had 3 fatalities reported. 2 of those were non-electrical in nature. There was an accident at a power plant involving steam. And so these figures also include non-electrical
Okay.
incidents as well. And the trends, we've looked for trends in what they are, but again, there are still relatively low 1, 2, 3 fatalities a year that are reported, and it's been very difficult to look for and find a specific trend year to year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I had, just an inquiry.
Any other questions regarding the reports?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. So that leaves us with the schedule. The case downstairs is concluded, so we don't have anything left on that today. Wednesday, March 18th, we have agenda at 9:30 a.m. Wednesday, March 25th, agenda at 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 1st, agenda at 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 8th, agenda at 10 a.m. Tuesday, April 14th through Monday, April 20th, we have an evidentiary hearing scheduled in ER 2019-0374. That's Empire's general rate case. That'll be in room 310 downstairs with Judge Clark. And Wednesday, April 15th, we have agenda currently scheduled at 10 a.m., but that may need to be moved due to the Empire hearing. We'll know as we get closer. So that gets us out through April 15th. Any questions, comments, requests regarding scheduling?
Do you want to make any comments about if the coronavirus does affect state government work, or if the Capitol decides to make any changes, if you plan to make any changes?
So internally, we've been having discussions with the division directors and the managers, particularly around telecommuting, what our policies are, how to qualify, how to prepare for that to make sure you're equipped to continue doing that. We made a provision last week for a witness in San Francisco who didn't want to travel here for our hearing, so we allowed that to come in over phone. I mean, it's clearly something that we're working on. It's a very fluid situation. Obviously, we all have the capabilities to call in or video in should we not choose to come to Jeff City for one reason or another. But we'll keep you posted. We're in touch with the governor's administration and the things that they're doing. So if there's any issuance of a declaration, obviously we'll respond accordingly.
Yep.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else for the good of order, we are adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.